Hey, I'm Toby and welcome back to this small corner of the internet where I talk about books. And in today's video, as it's LGBTQIA plus History Month here in the UK, I'm going to be focusing on gender. So gender fluidity, non-binary, transgender, all wonderful things to do with gender. And the first book that I'm going to talk about is The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. And this story is literally about the death of Vivek Oji. So no spoilers there. And the story starts when Vivek's mother opens her front door and then sees Vivek's dead body on her doorstep. She doesn't know how Vivek died, who left their body there, and she's on a mission throughout this novel to figure out the who, the what's, the whys, and grief is overwhelming her and she feels like she's not gonna find any peace until she knows what happened to her baby. And this story is set in Nigeria in 1998 when Sani Abacha is the military dictator, like in actual real life. And we're following Vivek, who has been taken out of university and has to come home for unmentioned reasons, but you can infer that it's due to mental health concerns and worries. And the day that he's brought back from university is the day that Sani Abacha, the military dictator in Nigeria at the time, dies. And what was so great is that the main story of identity, of self-expression, of gender, of sexuality is inseparable to the historical context of Nigeria at the time in 1998. So Emezi was very, very intentional about making the day that Vivek was brought home from university the same day that Sani Abacha died in this book, as there's this striking parallel between the sentiment and the general hope felt nationwide in Nigeria of freedom and of genuine democracy, as this was going to be the first democratic election in Nigeria since the 16-year military dictatorship. And this is simultaneously while Vivek is discovering their gender, their identity, their sexuality, and is given the space and given the support by their close friends to really embrace this, discover this, embody this, and just be true to who they really are. And what Emezi does masterfully is the way it interweaves, interconnects the social issues in Nigeria at the time, along with the awakening of identity of Vivek and also many other characters in this book. And I have such mixed feelings about this novel because Emezi's writing is so beautiful, like actually stunning, almost lyrical at times. As a reader, you feel like you're being directly transported to the streets and the hustle bustle of Nigeria, or you're in the marketplace. You can hear the Igbo, the Yoruba being chatted around. You can almost smell the food that's being described there. And the way that Emezi seamlessly weaves in Igbo culture with the syntax and the speech of the characters throughout. So it is such a nod and appreciation of Igbo and also Nigerian culture, while still making it accessible for those who aren't Igbo, who aren't Nigerian or West African at all. And the way the characters jump off these pages, they're able to give so much depth and complexity to these characters in not that long of a book, but the individual stories, but also how they interconnect and seamlessly weave into one another is just superb. And the reason I said I have mixed feelings about this novel is because there is one relationship in this novel. If you've read it, you know exactly what relationship I'm talking about, which I just, I wasn't here for. No, there was no need. I didn't understand why it was put into the story, because once that relationship did develop and blossom and you got sneak peeks and glimpses into it, it would take me out of the story a bit, because I just, no, I wasn't able to fully enjoy the story as much once that relationship developed. However, still the overarching story, the character development and growth, which I thought most of them were actually realistic. It wasn't that characters' growth was going from like A to Z like that. It was much more slow, gradual, which meant it was frustrating at times, but also realistic. I really did appreciate how Vivek's journey of self-discovery was told through the perspectives of his loved ones post their death. I really, really, really thought that was a really just different and smart way to go about telling Vivek's story. Even just hearing about Vivek and the impact that Vivek had on his loved ones, his friends, his parents, his cousin, you still found yourself absolutely loving Vivek, just wanting to protect them and give them a hug and wanting to meet them, because Emezi can still bring so much life to their character, despite the fact that they are dead throughout this book, and also that you're not really getting much of the narrative from their perspective. So yeah, Emezi's storytelling, writing is incredible. I definitely want to check out Fresh Water. So the second book that I want to talk about is Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters. And this book is messy, in capital letters, messy. And I was so here for it. It was messy in every sense of the word, and I loved it. Do not think at all that this novel is some sort of education guide for cis-het people about the trans experience. No. Torrey Peters, she herself is a transgender woman, she wrote this for trans people, and rightly so. She was not going to wear her best rainbow colours to appease or to appeal to cis-het people. She does not mince her words when it comes to dissecting the heteronormative experience and challenging all these unwritten rules of queerness. So this definitely did make for both an uncomfortable but eye-opening and wonderful read. So the synopsis of this book is a bit convoluted, it's a bit messy, as I said. So we're following three characters. So we have Reese, who, best character, who is a transgender woman. She's almost considered to be one of the elders in the transgender community in New York. Although actually, let me specify, the white transgender female community in New York. And Reese often is pursuing these affairs with married men who tend to be pretty violent and can be abusive. And then we have Ames. So Ames was born as James, transitioned to be Amy, and then detransitioned and is now Ames. And then we finally are following Katrina, who is a mixed race Chinese American cis divorced woman. When Ames was still Amy, before they detransitioned to become Ames, Amy, she was in a lesbian relationship with Reese for 5 years. So they were going strong. And once Amy detransitioned and became Ames, the relationship ended. And then whilst they're now Ames, they end up having an affair with their boss, Katrina, the divorced woman. And because Ames had taken hormones for, I think, about 3 years, they assumed that they were sterile. So it's like, we don't need protection. Until Katrina one day says, Belefu, I'm pregnant. And Ames is like, oh, Hanover Hesperides. And for Ames, although they've detransitioned, it doesn't mean they don't see themselves as transgender. It just means that they found living as a trans woman too difficult, because the oppression, the transphobia, it's a lot. And we do delve into that a bit in this book, of course. So Ames doesn't know how to react or reconcile with the idea of fatherhood that he knows that Katrina is going to expect from him and project on him. So Ames is like, my ex Reese, she really, really wants to be a mother. That's like her ultimate goal. She feels like her purpose in life is motherhood. And Ames knows that Reese will not project or push this idea of a father onto him. He would feel way more comfortable just being a parent, whatever that means to him. So Ames decides to present the idea to Katrina of, hey, why don't we do a non-nuclear queer family where the baby is blessed, has 3 parents, in fact. So me, my ex-girlfriend, and my current girlfriend, I don't know if they do labels, you know. And we go from there. Peter uses that story to really explore transgender social issues, womanhood, motherhood, identity, transphobia, gender dysphoria, fetishization. That one's a mouthful. And does it in true Peter style with wit, with dark humor, with irony, but also with compassion. And the beginning was slow. The first maybe 70, 80 pages, I wasn't really finding myself connecting with those three main characters. But once all their lives became intertwined in the modern day storyline, and they were trying to figure out, see how this queer non-nuclear family, this three-parent setup could work for them. And once that happened, the story went from there. And I became invested in the outcome, in them, and there were so many great conversations when it came to motherhood particularly. And also the three main characters were really good at trying to broaden the horizons of the other characters' minds. Some of the conversations that happen can seem a bit forced just because they're trying to work with the story dynamic whilst also making sure you have these really good deep dives into certain issues such as motherhood, womanhood, fetishization, I will get there, and all that good stuff. But overall, still the overarching story, the deep dives into the characters and the character studies, they were wonderful. So next we have The Vanishing Half by Brit, Bennett. And this novel is actually based on another novel, which is Passing by Nella Larsen. Larsen. But Bennett's story is actually a generational one where we're following these two twin sisters who live in the deep south in this really small town where colorism is rife. It is rife. Like the aim of the people in this town is to be as fair, as light-skinned, as white-passing as possible. Yeah, we love to see it. So these two twin sisters, Desiree and Stella, they run away at age 16. They want to escape this small town. You know, I go into the big, bad, wide world. Go to, pretty sure it's New York where they run to. And eventually their lives diverge. And then you have Desiree, who ends up having a dark-skinned daughter, and she ends up returning back to the hometown. She once tried escaping with her daughter. And then you have Stella, who decides to live as a white woman because she's white passing. And she doesn't tell her husband, she doesn't tell her daughter, Kennedy, that about her true racial identity, and then technically as well then Kennedy's true racial identity. And as I said, this is a generational story, so then we follow as well Desiree and Stella's daughters. So we have Jude, who is the dark-skinned woman, and then we have Kennedy, who is extremely white passing and thinks that she is just fully white and lives a very privileged lives a very privileged life because of that. And then those two daughters, so they're cousins, their lives end up unknowingly intersecting and weaving into each other's, and then we go from there. So of course a big part of this book is really honing in on racism, but especially colorism. But I was so pleasantly surprised because when we followed Jude, who was by far my favourite character, because I could really, really resonate with the internalized hatred she had for her dark skin. Not anymore, thank God. But, you know, way back when. And when she goes to California to go to college, she meets this black trans man, Reese. And they fall in love and have a really wonderful relationship. It was wonderful seeing the joy of when he's able to truly embrace his identity, both within college, but especially after college. And it also was amazing getting insight into the gender dysphoria that Reese was experiencing before transitioning and during transitioning, and that was extremely well done, I think. And I would have honestly loved it if Bennett dived even deeper into Reese's experience as a black trans man in the 80s, especially whilst he was transitioning. But I'm also very aware that Brit Bennett isn't the person to really be speaking on that. She can't speak on those experiences herself as a cis woman. So as much as I would have loved a bit more of an insight into that, I can appreciate that it's not her story or her experience to tell. So I definitely want to read more books where like it is a black trans man or a black trans woman who is the author, and then being able to really delve into the experiences that they can give to these characters and that they understand. We also got really great glimpses into the LGBTQIA plus community and also the AIDS crisis in the 80s in the US, whilst Jude was at college and made friends with wonderful people from the community. Let's be the best. And that was great. Again, I feel like we skimmed the surface a bit here, but as I said, the focus of this book was more colorism, racism. It's great we had some of that intersectionality, but oh, the book would have been 5 stars if we just had a bit more of that intersectionality, bit more of a delve into the LGBTQIA plus community, especially in the 80s in California. Like that would have been so fun to get more of like a sneak peek into that in this novel, but this novel was still great regardless. So next we have The Iliac Crest by Christina, Rivera, Garza, and it's translated by Sarah Booker. So Garza is a Mexican writer and Booker translates it from Spanish to English. Oof. And this is an off-kiltering lyrical masterpiece. And I don't use that word lightly. This is a genre-defying novel, and it will challenge your preconceived rigid notions of gender, the body, borders, time even. And this novel was written as a defiant response to the rising femicides, to the silenced female voices, to the disappearing females in the 20th century, especially in Mexico. So the synopsis is, it's a dark and stormy night, because we all know the best things happen on a dark and stormy night. And 2 women invade this unnamed narrator's house, and they proceed to ruthlessly question the host on his gender and identity. And the increasingly frantic protagonist, is failing to defend his supposed masculinity and eventually finds himself in a sanatorium. And this is just a gothic tale of destabilized male, female, binaries and subverted literary tropes. And it's just incredible. I've never written? No, I haven't. I have never read anything like this. So one of the women who barges into the narrator's house says she's one of the disappeared, and says that she is the Mexican writer Amparo Davila, who in real life was a real marginalized Mexican female author. And in this novel, in writing about Amparo Davila, Garza is reappearing her, and I love how she inserts references and her actual writing throughout this novel to really revitalize, rejuvenate, bring back her writing. So she is reappeared. She's not going to be one of those many disappeared females, whether that was in the literary field or whatever field that they were in. And this book, oh, it was so ahead of its time, and I love how it uses this disorientating and kaleidoscopic story almost. Reading this book feels like you're in a fun house, not because it's like a fun book, but because it's like, oh, like very topsy-turvy. I love how she uses that story to really beautifully explore the importance of language, especially how much of language is gendered, the use of gendered language, how the gendered nature of language can impact how you perceive yourself, how you perceive others, how you perceive the world, how the world and others then perceive you. And I think Sarah Booker, the translator, does a wonderful job of conveying this gendered notion of language really well in English, where our words aren't explicitly gendered the same way that Spanish is. And I love how in this translation she's still able to convey how so many words we have our own preconceptions and assumptions and interpretations and associate them with often binary gender roles or binary genders, male, female. And The way Garza just dismantles that and makes you realize how problematic and how it can completely destroy one's sense of self, as we see with the unnamed narrator, the protagonist in this book, when your supposedly strong grasp of gender, then when that starts disintegrating, how you have no idea of self anymore, how you see the world, how the world sees you, how you're meant to act or be or talk or interpret things. And it's just, it does just make you think, but in the best way. And it's one of those books I know when I come back to it and reread it, I'm going to get even more out of it. I'm going to gain something different from it, maybe consider gender or identity in even another way, and I'm so excited for that journey. And the reason that it's actually called the Iliac Crest is because that's the bone on the anatomy of people who are born biologically as women that distinguishes them from people born biologically as men. And so when the young acclaimed writer Amparo Davila arrives at the narrator's house, he sees her iliac crest kind of, you know, peeking out from, she must be wearing low-rise trousers, you know, and he feels this mixture of desire and fear when he sees it. And he also can't recall the name of the bone, and that is an ongoing theme throughout the book. And it almost represents the underlying truths behind appearances, behind people's preconceptions and prejudices when it comes to gender and what that means. So this book definitely isn't for everyone. If you're someone who really likes a very clear plot, or you don't really enjoy these different deep dives into social topics or political topics, then you probably won't enjoy this. The characters are not likable, you don't grow attached to them. It's more, they're almost just vessels to really explore gender identity, borders, that's a big one that's also explored in this book, and so on. The writing is gorgeous, it's lyrical, it's beautiful. And I'll say, if you enjoyed the writing in On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, then I think you'll definitely appreciate the writing and the sort of off-kiltering nature of this book, how there isn't this linear plot line. It's a bit more like, you know. So if you liked that book, I'd say, yeah, definitely check this one out. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I had so much fun. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. If you want to join the small corner of the internet where I just run my mouth about books, then subscribe. If you don't want to, don't. It's okay. It's okay. I'll see you next time. Bye.